All right, Carson, we've made it to opening day. The day that this episode is coming out is MLB opening day, or so I thought. And then I told you before we hit record that I was going to throw to you on this, and you told me no. Opening day is actually today, the day that we're recording. So what is the story there?
I wish I had more information about what the actual, I believe opening day is actually today, that there's like the first couple games or the first game or two of the official season are actually happening today. They did this last year with a couple games in Japan at the end of March. I don't think the games today, if there are even more than one, are in Japan. So Friday is kind of the big opening day, but I believe the season is officially started now. So I'm out of my, thinking about it as my sports exile because I don't watch any winter sports. So I get a nice little hibernation period, and now I get to have my mood dictated by the Toronto Blue Jays for the next 162 games.
And lots of people are going to join you on the bandwagon because of everything that happened last year. What's a reasonable expectation for the Blue Jays this season, or does that not exist?
I think, like with your Maple Leafs, the only reasonable expectation is no expectation. No matter how well things went the previous season, I have no idea how it's going to go, because so much of that felt completely like a fluke or completely like just right place, right time. They look really good. Like the roster looks really good, and they got some new cool talent, but I have no clue what's going to happen. And I'm not going to, I'll quietly hope, but we're not going to expect to make it to the World Series again unless we, things fall into place again.
If you get meaningful playoff games at the end of this season, are you going to go? Are you going to venture east? Are you going to attend?
For a playoff game? I mean, I was kind of close last year. And if I had jumped on early enough, I might have. It's really expensive though. I mean, so we'll see. We'll see how my year goes financially, and then I'll make that decision.
That's the reasonable attitude that we were looking for right there. That's what I'm talking about. There's also, before we get any further, there's going to be a continuity break on my YouTube channel for Eagle Eyes. There's something different about the camera view that you're looking at right now. Can you pinpoint what it is, Carson?
Did you clean the shelf or replace the shelf?
Yeah, I took a lot of crap off that bookshelf that's behind me, that's for sure. I've got a lot of CDs lined up on one of those shelves. I'm expecting to come into a handful more CDs in the near future and organize that. And then at some point, the CDs may leave and go into our living room as opposed to here in my office corner of what is our kitchen and dining area. So I'm kind of off in this little corner of the house whenever I'm at my workstation, because that's where it is. And I've got my small CD collection behind me there. But this is something that has been happening for me in the last little while. I've finally got my act together a little bit on physical media. I have a stereo set up that I'm going to import from my dad's place on Galliano Island and finally set one up here at our place with some nice speakers. Nice. Have a turntable in the house, which I don't currently have, so I got to get that over from there too. Then I'll actually have something where I can play LPs, because right now I got nothing. Yeah. I have a couple of ways I can play CDs, but nothing for LPs. But that is going to be that's going to be a developing story for me over the next couple episodes. I'll keep you posted.
Awesome. I will be checking out for updates on that. That's very exciting though. I've been enjoying growing my little vinyl collection this year. It's going well.
Yeah, that's my spring cleaning update as we head into spring. About a year ago, we could have caught the 1-year anniversary of us recording the pilot episode that we never released. That was a little bit before our last episode dropped, but in this month of March, we mark 1 year since we recorded episode 1 of this show, which is kind of cool.
That is very cool. Episode 1 or episode 0, the pilot?
Oh, yeah, I do this funny thing with some of my shows where I often do an episode 0, and that causes confusion. Yeah, that's right. I don't even know for sure off the top of my head. But the first one that you heard, if you watched
the first real
episode.
One. Yes, yeah, got it. Nice. Yeah, wow. 1 year, hey? That's still ticking.
Well, speaking of spring cleaning, you know who did some spring cleaning at their company and they cut a product that had been getting a lot of buzz. How do you like that transition?
A great pivot. It's an awesome pivot. OpenAI, right?
OpenAI has shut down Sora. We discovered this earlier this same day that we're recording, so I'm glad we caught this in time because this is something that interests us. I think we managed to get away without devoting a full-on segment to Sora in its brief life. I'm pretty sure we referenced it, but I don't think we ever like devoted any serious time to it, which feels good.
I think we probably touched on it in some segments, generally about slop and generally about kind of AI stuff. But you're right that I don't think we ever did a full length segment on Sora. And great, I'm glad we saved ourselves the breath. I'm glad. This is, I think, 2 years after they announced Sora, or after Sora launched, maybe, which seems long. I thought, I kind of remember it being younger than that, but I think there was the early version of Sora before they kind of had their video generation model sorted out, and then a later Sora version with like that was doing the audio and the kind of hyper realistic image or video generation is kind of when it's really started to take off. And then that's when you saw, Instagram and TikTok get flooded with Sora videos. And that was fairly recent. I want to say that was within the last year.
I think Sora launched towards the end of 2024. So it's probably around that year and a half mark at the most. I don't know if it would actually be 2 years, but you're right, because we didn't cover it over time, we missed stuff like this past December, there was a deal that OpenAI struck with Disney to license its IP to deliver Disney characters in not only Sora, OpenAI's video generating app and platform, but also in ChatGPT image generation.
Right.
They wanted to allow people to make stuff with Disney characters, and they paid Disney the licensing fee to make that happen. And some of the news articles about Sora shutting down now talk about how Disney was surprised because they struck this licensing deal, and yet now one of the planks of it is going away. It's not ripping up the deal, though, because in theory, Disney will still allow its characters to get generated on ChatGPT images. That's not changing with the closing of Sora, but there was this Disney deal pretty recently that implied Sora was a going concern, and yet now they have decided to stop running it.
It is, man, this is just happy news. As springtime rolls around, I was very surprised to see that. And at the same time, not surprised. I'm not sure if you are following any of the other AI frontier news, but recently Sam Altman kind of declared a code red at OpenAI based on a few things, but it seems like product-wise, they were realizing they're in a bit of hot water because Anthropic, another frontier AI model, is kind of eating their lunch in AI coding, which really at the moment is a major way that these platforms are making money and are seeing maybe some more long-term success. In fact, it appears that this might be the only actual valuable use of this stuff. And when I say valuable, it's more expensive right now than hiring more developers, but companies are at least willing to pay a lot of money for that. And so OpenAI just recently kind of announced no, we have to we're refocusing. We're going to stop being so distracted with slop generation and all this stuff. I didn't expect that to go as far as we're shutting down Sora, but I think it makes sense. I mean, I can't imagine how much money they spend training a huge video model and hosting that platform.
Do you think this is then about OpenAI wanting to clean up their financial picture and make themselves look good and puff themselves up for possible IPO or further investment solicitation?
I think it's maybe more of a posturing change. everyone, when they announced the Sora app, because Sora was the name of their video generation model before it was a standalone application. So
that's right. It wasn't a platform.
Yeah. And so so Sora wasn't always a platform, or not always an app you could have on your phone. But when they went that direction with Sora and they're like, hey, this is now an app, and I think you can scroll Sora through like a feed of slop as well. I think tech journalism found it kind of surprising, right? Because OpenAI was a fairly serious company that at its founding was focused on like solving problems for humanity using AI, right? It used to be a nonprofit. They've kind of ditched that. And then it was like, okay, maybe it's going to be an enterprise software. They're going to focus on making really smart and capable AIs who can do research and PhD level intelligence stuff. And they still had some of that. And then the Sora thing is just, you can generate, images of Yoda holding a beer or something like that now. Like it just became, it was like, is this what you want? Is this like the image you want to project and how you want everyone to know you? And so I think it's a bit of, yes, probably there's a financial element to it. I read some analysis today from analysts going like, yeah, Sora was not generating any money for OpenAI and costing them quite a lot of money. And so they're having to just like really, I think, look hard at some of those things and tighten the belt a little bit.
So are we going to get a reprieve from anyone else creating a Sora-like platform for a healthy amount of time because of how impossible it will be for the foreseeable future to run something like it profitably, because the compute costs would have to go down several orders of magnitude probably for any other company to try doing this again?
That's a good question. And yeah, I mean, like OpenAI, if OpenAI couldn't make it work, then I can't imagine any of these other firms will. I think this probably does put a pause on this like video generation stuff, which I think is particularly expensive, especially given the licensing issues, right? They had to pay money to Disney to license things. The Sora was plagued with like a consent problem of the app was supposed to let people, like Sam Altman, the CEO of OpenAI, registered on Sora, said like anyone can use my likeness and generate videos. So like
anyone can make skibbity toilet videos of me anytime to get things going.
Yeah, that's exactly what was happening. And so when Sora launched, there was a bunch of garbage videos of Sam Altman, and it was supposed to prevent users from saying like, okay, make an image of or a video of this random guy or my friend or whatever, if they didn't explicitly agree to that. And of course, that's a much more difficult governance problem than OpenAI, I think, bargained for. And so they had this issue of, I'm sure they were at risk of being sued. I'm sure like the copyright infringement stuff, like they licensed with Disney, but Disney's not every, movie franchise. And so I can imagine they were about to be in hot water with other folks as well if they didn't tighten this up.
Yeah, I mean, everybody's happy to see Sora go down. That's the funniest thing from the article that I used as a reference to the news, which is from CBC, actually. And because I'm not going to go to their X account and read the actual statement, but what they quote from the statement that I loved in the CBC piece is, this is what OpenAI said, probably to conclude their statement. Quote, "What you made with Sora mattered, and we know this news is disappointing." And it's funny because obviously that's just not true. Nobody cares about this. Nobody likes this.
It really drives home a point that I think we made very early on when we were talking about, I think, AI music and AI art in general on one of the earlier episodes of Upsample, where I was saying, like, I think the thing to do about this is nothing. No one likes this. If you just ignore it, it will go away because it's unprofitable for these companies. And like, even if it was a huge money pit, like everything else these AI firms are doing, and it was popular and it was like driving traffic to their platform and, users were flocking to Sora to make videos all the time, OpenAI would have kept it around. I guarantee you that. If it was like a numbers success, investors would be happy to see that, even if it's very expensive, because that's how their other stuff works, right? ChatGPT has a huge user base, and investors are still kind of sticking with it and be very bullish on OpenAI, despite the fact that OpenAI has never demonstrated they can, like turn this profitable, right? The compute is always going to be so much more expensive than the revenue that users are willing to pay for the service. So if Sora was even remotely popular and people really liked it, it would have stuck around, and it's just not even close.
That's right. Yeah, you got to find some way to get out because it's not popular and it's not going to be what is going to, well, I guess they don't really care about rehabilitating their image necessarily, but you're right. It's not necessarily just about the money. It's about the optics. On the other side, they probably don't want to look and come across like metaverse era Meta if they can help it. They'd probably rather not be that. There's this whole other thing that happened in between our conversations here that we're not going to be able to get into too much, but there was this whole thing with the Pentagon and Anthropic and OpenAI acquiescing to the Pentagon. And so they're in hot water and they're thinking about all these kinds of things. And it isn't just about the unit economics, because everything they do blows away the unit economics considerations. They're trying to spend money as fast as possible. They don't really care about that. It's about other things. Yeah.
Yeah. The one thing I'll say on the point of, their image problem currently is, anecdotally, I work at a large company that uses a lot of AI tools, and I'm seeing hundreds of users just at my one company flock from ChatGPT to starting to use Anthropic's tool, Claude, instead, partially because Claude has some advantages over OpenAI, partially because of OpenAI's now perceived, willingness to do business with the U.S. federal government. And so that was what precipitated Sam Altman calling the code red. Is, Claude is starting to, on the enterprise, starting to really win there, even though Anthropic's numbers overall of users are so much smaller than OpenAI. I think OpenAI sees that there's trouble afoot for them.
Yeah, that's the state of affairs with Sora shutting down, which is great news. I'm stoked about that. I know you're stoked about that. Yep. Now, we also got music MCP taken down, as we remember from last episode. So joining the graveyard of sloppitalism, as the phrase goes, that you used, probably didn't coin. You probably heard that somewhere.
Yeah, I don't. If I did, someone has to pay me for that. I'm sure it's everywhere now.
It's a banger. Yeah, it's been in my mind for a month now. So, but here's another company, hey, that has acquiesced to the U.S. government. There's another good transition for you. We're talking about Spotify, also another company that's fighting optical challenges, perceived and real.
Yeah. This is a very recent announcement from Spotify. I think the date on this press release is March 15th. And Spotify is now quote, giving artists more control over what shows up under their name. This is the infamous Spotify profile takeover problem. We've talked about that several times. I think it's one of the biggest things anyone ever brings up with why streaming services suck is Spotify, but really all streaming services have this problem with how distributors interface with these streaming services, that there's very little what you might call operational security or, brand and image protection on Spotify. And so someone as big as Drake or whoever, Taylor Swift, is vulnerable to someone telling their distributor, yeah, my name's Taylor Swift, and put this on the Taylor Swift profile. Maybe Taylor Swift is out of size now where Spotify would catch that. But
well, I mean, this was found by the podcast search engine, and we devoted an episode to it at the time where they called it the Russian Cake switcheroo because of the band Cake and some Russian rappers who would add the band Cake as a featured artist, right? We were up on this, not when it first started by any means, but we were pretty early to it. And I don't know if you've seen other people get hip to it recently, but what I happened to notice in the weeks actually before mid-March when they would have made this announcement, and about a month before now when we're talking about it, I started to see this land with jazz musicians who are a generation older than us. They started to realize this for the first time in numbers within the last 2 to 4 weeks. There were some high profile ones. I can't remember all of them off the top of my head. There's one piano player, Jason Moran, another piano player, Benny Green. I'm pretty sure I saw both of them take to Facebook and Instagram with talking videos and cameras in front of them talking about how they have discovered this problem for the first time, and they are freaked out by it because they didn't really know it was possible. As would be the case for any artist who doesn't know the situation, right? It's like you don't know that this is possible, and you see somebody else's music on your page. You're like, what the heck? How is this possible? This shouldn't be possible. And so I start to notice these jazz musicians make videos saying exactly that and talking around the industry about it. So I wonder if there was just a recent rash of it. Maybe all these people were firing up their music MCP and doing this while it was still amenable. Right. But I wonder if there was a recent rash of high-profile people who finally noticed this for the first time, and they had this naivete about how it came in front of them, where they were able to recognize how unacceptable it is from that naive view. You know, we know how it works, and so it almost seems more acceptable to us if we, you know, bring in that view, but really it shouldn't be. So now we finally have, it's worth noting, I guess, one streamer who is taking steps toward it. And they say this, and I'm sure they're very happy to say this in the press release, where they're like, well, we can get it taken down if you're part of this beta as they're rolling it out, but it might still be out there on Apple Music, so you should still let your label and or distributor know if something like this happens, because we are launching this tool to help you fix this more easily. But hey, maybe those other streamers, maybe they haven't figured that out yet, and maybe it's still going to be a problem with them. Now, that said, it does seem like this happens on Spotify more than the other platforms in specific. Yeah,
Spotify seems to be particularly vulnerable to it, and maybe that's just people on the distributors only pushing to Spotify in some cases. Like, that's the distributor that they really care about the most. I have a couple thoughts about this. First of all, I think it only matters that there is one service that has this feature. And the feature basically is that you as an artist now can review planned releases, where your distributor has told Spotify, hey, Will Chernoff has a song coming out. Spotify says now to you on your artist.spotify.com, the kind of back-end platform on your side where you could, set your profile images. It'll now have you review those optionally and approve or reject those. You only need to see that on one platform, because the people who are spamming DSPs with incorrect, music, or trying to do profile takeovers, they just will do the same thing to all of the platforms, mostly, right? Like, that's the default behavior of CD Baby and DistroKid. And to get more sophisticated than that, to say like, oh, now Spotify's locked down, I should do one push per DSP or something. I can't imagine, like, you just need to notice this problem once, talk to your provider, your label or something, and try to get it shut down. It's probably a good thing.
It's incredible that they didn't do it before. It's the same as when you look at, consumer apps who don't offer two-factor authentication. I don't know how many of those there are left, but over the last several years, this ran pretty late up to relatively current times, and you're like, why have they not done this? This must be intentional to some degree. Like, this feature cannot be that complicated, and it is kind of absurd that it took this long for even one streamer to put this layer of control. Maybe that spoke to how much power the distributors had as this was all coming into play for the first time and getting set up. Like, distributors would include, the majors and their distribution platforms. So maybe it was so distributor oriented at the beginning that the streamers felt like they couldn't do this, or the distributors would have framed it as like, well, you got to take what we give you. We're going to be the gatekeepers, but you got to take everything the way that we set it up. And maybe now Spotify is able to change that as the leading app in the marketplace, to go back to distributors and be like, no, we're going to put another gate here, and we're going to do some gatekeeping of our own. I'm sure the distributors don't love that, but they've had it pretty good in terms of being the bottleneck for this digital music world that we're in right now. So I think the distributor to streamer relations part of it is kind of interesting. That probably looks way different for the majors than it does for you and I on DistroKid and such.
Yeah.
But that's something that I'm thinking about. I wonder how quickly another streamer is going to roll out the same feature. You'd imagine that that's likely. I don't really know if they're going to jump on it right away or if this is just going to stay a Spotify thing. But I mean, this is an example. It's that worst person makes a good point sort of thing where this is Spotify doing a good thing. Yeah. It's really overdue thing. Doesn't outweigh anything they do, optically. Talking about optics, it doesn't solve. It doesn't make them good in everyone's eyes ever again. But this is something that should happen. So they're gonna milk it because they need to have a win. But it is a win.
It is a win, and like to Spotify's credit, I think they're always at the forefront of the software platform of it all. Right? We've talked before about how Apple and YouTube Music, for example. Apple Music and YouTube Music are almost like loss leaders for these. They're just kind of an add-on. Like Apple doesn't need Apple Music, the software platform, to be amazing. Apple gets your money many, many, many other ways, and Apple Music's a chunk of that. And so I would imagine, don't particularly care about being at the very cutting edge of that software piece. And so Spotify has always been, usually for the worst, right? Usually for things like, hey, well, how about payola and we'll put your song on more playlists? Or, hey, how about, all of these different, an AI DJ that you don't want as a part of the app or whatever. Like,
right.
Spotify, I would say, is the most tech company of these streaming platforms. And so it makes sense that they're the first to do this. Hopefully it's a pretty fast follow. I also think that these other streamers, this is maybe going to be two thoughts. The first being, we also know that Spotify sees artists now as a major customer of theirs, right? So I think that maybe is also what shifted is in Liz Pelly's book and in subsequent reporting, she's talked a little bit about on Spotify's earnings call, they'll talk about, they have this whole vertical for just artists, like people, they generate money by people doing the payola thing, the what's it called, discovery mode,
right? They talked about this on a recent episode of Critical Listening, did they not? They went into how they framed it, how Spotify framed it. So Spotify really sees artists as a customer segment of theirs, a serious one, and probably one that we've drilled this point home a lot, which is that in the indie music world, these platforms and these companies are realizing that artists will spend way more money than fans ever will on this stuff, right? Someone trying to get famous is going to spend way more money. And so in Spotify's eyes, it's important for them to at least keep artists, I shouldn't say happy, but at least this facade of a working relationship with them. And so I can see that driving some of this. And same thing. I think, Tidal, I get emailed by, I never set up my Tidal artist profile because Tidal is such a small platform, but Tidal is really drilling down. They're emailing me every few weeks being like, hey, our artist platform is really good now. They keep saying. And so I think they're seeing that playbook again, where it's the artists are your customers, right? If you're one of these big platforms. And so they're trying to improve an artist user experience to keep them as customers. Interesting that Tidal is looking for touch points, because is Tidal not owned by a company that just laid off a large portion of their staff, Block?
Yeah. Wait, is Tidal directly owned by Block now, or is it just another?
I think so.
Okay, associated. Okay. I think Block did those layoffs because Block had 12,000 to 13,000 employees for a mid-sized software company, which I hate to tell you, as someone from the inside, you don't need 13,000 employees, and it probably was not an AI play.
We still have a lot of track. It's already been a few years. We have tons of track left for companies to make layoffs, to one, correct overhiring of 2020 and 2021, and two, respond to a couple years down the line interest rate considerations from the interest rate elevation in 22 and 23. We still have a while to go where companies can still be reacting to that and still blame it all on AI.
Totally. And the AI hype cycle of it all, right? Like Block's stock price soared after they announced those layoffs.
There's a tongue twister. Look at that. Block's stock price soared.
And so, I guess I assume Tidal is still fine. I don't think that was a meaningful percentage of Tidal's workforce at all, but interesting times all around, and a weird rare W for Spotify with this profile protection. About time.
I don't expect them to get any more W's than my hockey team, the Toronto Maple Leafs, going forward, but This was a cool thing that I discovered, though, kind of over the last week, where I've had some time to like stretch out creatively or read different things. I discovered the writing of one Jasmine Sun, who is a little younger than us and has been writing about tech and literally calling it a scene report in some cases. So that's an interesting perspective that she has, and I've gone back and read through most of her Substack archive, and I find it fun to watch her project. I appreciate that it's like this post-grad Gen Z worldview that is different than what I have. For sure, it's noticeably different. There's enough years of separation where I'm in a different space than that, and so I'm reading this and I'm recognizing that it's someone else's experience and I can't identify with it. Just like how I have never worked in tech, and so but it's a cool for me to learn about it through her view. So I've been digging her writing. She went on the Hard Fork podcast, and I believe you listened to, or at least checked out, that episode where she did an interview segment in the episode of March 20th, so pretty recently. She also published a story in The Atlantic called "The Human Skill That Eludes AI," and she corroborated it with a Substack post around the same time and talked about how old AI models were good creative writers versus the over-optimized ones of today. And she talked about that on the Hard Fork interview as well. So that got me thinking, what do you make of this theme? What do you think about that concept?
I thought it was interesting, the point she was making, which is that these like very old models, she's talking about like GPT 2.5 and GPT 3, which are both models that predate ChatGPT. So ChatGPT is 3.5, and that's, I think, probably where she would mark as like the start of the downturn of that, because ChatGPT, even when it was early, it would make lots of mistakes and hallucinate all the time. Made sense to read it. Like, it could make like legible, you could have conversations with it and it could make legible text. These early, models were almost like a little bit schizophrenic or something. Like, they could you would be trying to have a conversation and they would like have like bits of a poem, and they'll just, text that has nothing to do with what you're saying, and then they'll complete the thought. And it was, I think her point is like, that's a lot more interesting than an AI going like, you're absolutely right, and giving you like a a tripart bullet point list of responses to whatever you're saying. I don't know that I would call that good writing. I think she was sort of, it seems like winking a little bit, like that's at least a lot more interesting, and it's a lot more like creative and weird than what we get out of those things, which I would agree that the current models, it's not good writing. It is the most milquetoast, generic, bland thing, just as by nature of like how LLMs operate. So I agree that it was better, in scare quotes, for creative writing before, but was it good writing?
Yeah, I mean, this is why we need the word slop, and why it's become so useful, is because we can't just talk about good and bad. We need to talk about slop versus real, because it doesn't mean much to say whether it's good or bad when the model is just trying to create the most bland but optimized and mission successful text that it can, because you could say that that's good.
Yeah.
And to say that it's bad or good, it doesn't really matter at that point. It just matters that it's slop. And then there was something, I guess Jasmine says, about the old models where they were not capable of outputting slop in the sense that we understand it now. You wouldn't call it slop. You call it something else. You could call it bad. You could call it weird or misplaced or off-putting, but it wasn't even capable of producing slop yet because it wasn't capable enough.
Do you think there's an element of slop, a necessary quality of slop, that it is always uninteresting? That it's always a little bit boring?
Yeah, for sure. That it can be successful in what it sets out to do, but that it's boring because successful in what it sets out to do. Well, to who? I mean, to like a generic corporate reader or to some kind of eval, right? Like a lot of these models are trained on passing tests, and that's what it feels like.
I wonder, I think it has to be a little bit uninteresting. And then I have a counterfactual right now, which is, have you been watching Iran's videos that they're making, their propaganda videos?
Oh boy, no, I haven't.
It's their AI slop videos of Donald Trump, but as as in the animation style of the Lego movie. And the one from like today or yesterday, like the 24th or 25th, is a rap song with like an AI Drake rapping about how Trump's making this huge mistake.
Wait, do they use Sora? Is this why OpenAI closed Sora? Was it part of their contract with the Pentagon?
It really might have been. It could have been. I didn't see a watermark on it, but it's too long to be a Sora video. It's like over a minute long. It's like a really long rap song. And so I'm like, okay, it's absolutely slop. And yet it is interesting maybe for other reasons or whatever. I would not describe those videos as boring, I'll say. They're so absurd. And more maybe the absurdity is at the meta layer. Like if some 13-year-old just published that, maybe it would be more slop, but the interest is because it's like the Iranian propaganda machine making these videos, which are pretty entertaining in context versus other propaganda I've seen in my lifetime. So,
well, is it Agit slop? Is it what we call the stuff that the Never Post podcast talked about in the U.S. government obviously doing? Is it that, but from the other side?
Yeah, I think that's actually right. It's about the same kind of quality and same kind of like tongue in cheek as some of the Agit slop from the right that we see, in the DHS recruitment ads and stuff. I think coming from the Iranian government, there's a lot more like wink, wink, nudge, nudge to the global world who's watching this and not exactly on America's side. So I think there's a little more there than there is for the DHS ads, but there's a little long tangent about from the AI writing, but slop is relevant.
Well, the kernel that facilitated Jasmine Sun's story in the Atlantic apparently was Sam Altman talking to Tyler Cowen and saying that GPT 6 and 7 are going to be able to go out and conquer the world and just clean up in terms of efficacy, but that it probably still won't be able to produce that good of a poem. That thing that Altman said was kind of what spurred her on to explore the idea. Yeah.
I think he's right, and it's interesting to hear him admit that. I wish that the Suno guy would be saying the same thing about Suno music.
Right.
When do you think Suno can write a good song? And if he was like, I don't know, maybe in like 3 years it'll be like a competent songwriter, but it won't make good music for another, I think that's weirdly self-aware of Sam. And also probably reflects Sam's priorities, right? Like, I don't think they aren't training the GPT models to to be really, truly great creative writers. When these models improve, they get better at writing business copy, writing technical jargon, emulating a style. But even then, when you're emulating a style, just like how I might write an email, not, Jasmine's article, I think, gives a couple like literary examples where like it can't do it because those writers write too interesting.
Yeah, it's also, I mean, she pins it on, in large part, what is apparently called post-training of the models, which I'm not super clear on, but maybe you know a little bit more about, and you understand when she says that, what that means, about why it's causing models to be super safe and corporate as we all know them to be.
Post-training is, so after you are like just putting the AI in a room with all the text on the internet that has ever existed, plus more, that process is a little bit magical, and it comes out with like very kind of unexpected results often. That's the kind of stuff you would see in the early, even ChatGPT 3.5 days, where it would sometimes freak out or say something weird, or give you an answer in a tone that wasn't appropriate for the conversation you were having. So AI firms have kind of solved this with post-training, where you take that model, and I believe the type of post-training she's referencing is called RLHF, reinforcement learning with human feedback. And that is, you have a conversation with the model and it gives you an answer, and the human who's reviewing it chooses which answer is best. And if you were a user of ChatGPT, I want to say maybe 2 years ago, it actually used to do this in ChatGPT. It started generating 2 responses, and then it would ask you like, hey, which of these is a better answer? And then that information would go back into the model. And just by virtue of that type of training, you are getting this, like, you're going towards the mean, right? The most bland thing will be the most popular with most people. And so it's kind of working as intended, right? You don't want it to say something really unexpected or really surprising in general. You want it to have a very predictable, safe response. And of course, it's completely antithetical to making art.
Yeah, because the other thing she mentions, of course, is that it can't have taste. We talk about taste sometimes, but that it can't. Like, it can't understand why good literature is interesting, because the concept of why is not part of its world in some profound sense. At least that's how I understand it.
Yeah, definitely. It is, again, hopeful for me that like these firms, I think, are realizing the real limitations of these large language models. And if you pay attention to how these CEOs talk about AGI, right, the artificial general intelligence is the thing they're all striving for, they are whittling down their definition of what AGI will look like as by the week, right? I think Sam
moving the goalposts, yeah.
Totally, yeah. Constantly moving the goalposts, saying, okay, we'll have, AGI next year or whatever, within 2 years, sometimes the thing. And then what they've always been a little vague on that. Is that just being really capable? Like, is this, is it the fact that like I can make an app in a few keystrokes with Claude? Is that AGI? It's like, no, okay, that's not quite there. But, they've already taken away things like, the old definition was like, can exceed humans on basically every task. And that's like no longer part of the equation. It's like, well, text generation and like, writing code is probably what it can do better than, 90% of people or whatever. But music, no. Creative writing, no. Yeah, it's interesting.
So if we ground this in music practice, you would come out feeling like, okay, and this is actually, Casey Newton and Kevin Roos talked about this too, when I think Jasmine asked them in their 3-person conversation, was like, do you feel like you need to be weirder to seem less like the bot? And they both said, yeah, of course. And the thing to respond to in music that's like that, or the thing that you can go and do if you feel that way and you're in the arts, is to go and do stuff that's more obviously lo-fi, but not even like lo-fi in the quote-unquote lo-fi way, just like things that are more out there and that show some abandon for what normal standards would look like. Like for me, it would be something like if I ended up dropping like a 25-track EP where like all the tracks are super short, or like a 25-track 40-minute album or something
Yeah.
on my Bandcamp or whatever, where it's just me singing and playing bass and guitars and stuff and recording myself and not going into a studio and not getting it mixed and mastered like a lot of the people that I surround myself with would. It would be coming out with some kind of project like that to get away from it all and to be human. And it's a good impetus, this is what people mean when they say, oh, in reaction to the AI era, people are going to want more human stuff. It's when we get spurred on to actually do things like that, and when we're not as afraid of them anymore, because the fear of being closer to the slop is greater. It starts to exceed the fear of, oh, my project is not going to meet the benchmarks and it's not going to be as good as it's supposed to be.
Yes. And it's a very good kind of antidote to the algorithm chasing thing, right? The idea of like stream bait pop, or I think part of what I was talking about in that article we talked about in one of the episodes last year, the big things coming, whereas there's this, again, push to, I think artists were feeling this, again, push towards the mean, where it's like, you gotta write for the algorithm, your music has to sound a certain way if it's going to succeed. And the point of my article there was like, no, even if you do really great at this, that's not going to work out for you. And that's still not even more the case, because who's great at gaming an algorithm and getting seen is like AI will win that every time, right? Like being the most average will eventually, like, once the kinks are worked out and people can't tell it from human music, which that still is on the human side, as people really just like hate that they're listening to AI mostly. But that might go away one day, and then all we have is like to sound like weird and do what we want and, be human with it, which I think is very reassuring.
I'll just leave this as a commentary too on the hard fork episode specifically. Like this episode, me having been an often listener, but not an every episode listener, especially in the Upsample era, I found it a valuable listen, and I probably still will. But on this episode, I did finally get submerged in the feeling that I think is the feeling people have when they dislike the show, which is that the two hosts, love them. They are so deeply feel the AGI pilled. Maybe that's the wrong term, because that's like part of the rationalist, doomer. That's a term from that world. No, it's not the right term for it. They're so caught up in the rush of the AI era and covering it that they can no longer imagine life without it, or really even entertain the perspectives of life without it. And they've probably acted that way for a while, but it landed for me on that episode. And I think the exact moment where it did was when they were surprised to hear, well, maybe they weren't surprised by the statement itself, but like when Jasmine said that people hate finding out that the writing was AI. They may not hate it right away on first blush, but once they realize it's AI, then they hate it because it's AI.
Right.
And I think for Casey and Kevin, I think they are viewing that. I think they don't like that, because it challenges like their. I don't think they are around people who feel that way, whereas we are. We're always around people who feel that way, and I think they're never around people who feel that way. I guess that's what I realized. Yeah,
they're very, I think, immersed in Silicon Valley and the tech space, where this stuff is just the water you're swimming in, and I'm having to swim in it for 8 hours a day, but thankfully I can get out of the water and be in my normal life and not worry about this stuff. And they, I think, have sort of lost the perspective. There are other episodes where they all talk to a genuine AI skeptics, and they just cannot see that perspective anymore. It's so, the arrival of this stuff is so inevitable to them. And in one sense, it has arrived, right? I think that's the kind of the position there going on, right? They're not talking about a future that's maybe. These are tools that people are actively using and that are actively having an impact on our world. I think they are accepting some of these, and The New York Times has been guilty of this many times over the years, accepting what corporations are just telling us is the case instead of truly examining the claims of some of these. I would say sometimes Casey's a little less credulous of AI firms than Kevin. I think he's a little more just like anti-corporate power and maybe has a little more skepticism, at least about what the future looks like, right? I think they do sometimes express alarm and concern. I wish occasionally they would just like, spend a week without using the tools and see how much better you feel.
Yeah, it's true. The way you framed it that's right. It's not necessarily they were surprised that there are people out there who just hate it because it's AI once they find out that it is, regardless of the content itself. But it's because they are now so deep in it that they're just not accessing that view anymore.
Yeah, exactly. Which is too bad, because I think, at least when it started, Kevin was like a pretty skeptical observer of some of this stuff. I mean, they're both writers for a living. Like, you should think they should have a healthier disdain for it, but
Yeah. Well, let's do some human curation to take it out, because we've got a powerful recommendations section today, because we both got multiple music recommendations here, if I'm not mistaken, because I've got a few, and I think you mentioned that you got a few as well. So we could trade off here. Do you want to start?
Yeah, pound for pound. Yeah, this one is something that I only checked out because of earlier music that you recommended to me. This is a new album by Gregory Ullman, Extra Stars, that came out 2 days ago, I think, in full, at the time of recording, early this week. Great. He's an incredible... He's a guitarist, right? This is an album that he does not sound like he's playing guitar, but he's kind of doing pretty amazing work, sort of the Blake Mills thing where it's like, is this a guitar? What's going on here? Effects heavy stuff.
This follows on a previous recommendation of yours for the project with Sam Wilkes and Josh Johnson, right?
Yeah, Ullman Johnson Wilkes. So that's my first one. What's your first rec?
So my first one, I guess I'll go reverse chronological, like came out oldest, just to figure out how to divvy this up. So Tamika Reed, cellist, somebody I haven't ever seen live, but I'll probably get the chance to at some point in the near future. The Tamika Reed Quartet is a huge band for me, or it has been for several years. They have a few albums, and they released another one this year called Dance Skip Hop. It's on Out of Your Head Records, and this is one of the bands that got me to really dig into Mary Halvorson for sure.
Okay.
I don't know if it was the first Mary Halvorson joint that I really started to check out, but this is a band that's been together as a constant lineup for a while, and it's been making this music with Tamika Reed on cello and Mary Halvorson on guitar. It's Jason Robke on bass and Tomas Fujiwara on drums, who also plays a lot with Mary Halvorson. The latest album, Dance Skip Hop, it's my favorite album by them.
Sweet.
I picked it up on Bandcamp digitally. They've got some cool looking LPs for it, so absolutely, I'm going to pick that as my first one.
Cool. Okay, my second one is by a band or an artist duo called Photochem. It's Photo KEM.
Okay.
I don't know that much about this. I should say that all of these, I believe, are pulls from, I finally subscribed to Hearing Things, which we've talked about in previous episodes. So that's a side recommendation. Great music journalism. I've found so much great music just by reading their album reviews. But
that's the overhead recommendation over all of this.
Yes. So A Mat in the Garden by Photochem is an album, and it's like it's rapping over what I would describe as like American minimalist classical music. It's like piano, strings, and rap, sort of like. Yeah, and sometimes the rap is a little more like spoken word poetry-y, but it's very interesting. It's very like, at times very pretty, at times heavy. Sort of that like, imagine a rapper over like Steve Reich or something like that, Philip Glass.
So this is in the segment that people would call drumless hip hop or rap because
Absolutely,
there's no
it's
drums.
absolutely drumless. Yeah, yeah. There might be one song where there's like a drum machine or something, but it's no, it's pretty much just like straight up, again, American minimalist classical music.
Nice. All right, back to me. Okay, here's another one. I've got this album called Beautifulism Sweet Surrender by Marquise Hill, trumpet player who came and played the Jazz Festival in its most recent edition. This is one of those albums that unites so many different things from the history of black music and the way that it's played by all these people today, and it proves it out to be such a long and enduring continuum that all makes sense when you throw it together. Whereas if you like isolate jazz and R&B and hip hop, you know, you can isolate them in different time periods, but there are some people, Marquise Hill has been one of these people for many years now, where he's had his band called the Black Tet playing like acoustic jazz and still kind of accessing this thing where you listen to them and you feel like you're listening to the entire history of black music played by some of the most talented black musicians active today. And this new album is not that. It is more like an R&B beat influenced album. It has a lot of nice textures, has a lot of warmth, and well, it's called in brackets Beautifulism, so you kind of tell it has that soft aesthetic, but it's got some features. This is definitely one of my favorite albums that I've been listening to so far this year, so I hope you like it.
Sweet. I will check that out. That's very up my alley. All right, my third is an album by an artist called Jade, spelt K Jade. The K is silent. It's called On Everything I Love. And this is like an underground hip hop record, kind of in, I guess, like two comparisons or two anchor points for this style of hip hop is like Earl Sweatshirt, sort of like gritty underground, maybe a little more like poetic and understated. And No Name, Chicago rapper. Yeah, she's got this like great kind of voice, understated delivery. The production's really interesting. Yeah, it's just like really a really enjoyable record, and it's been on repeat for me recently.
Nice. Okay, so you've put in 3, so I do have a third that I want to point to, and then is that where we're going to call it?
That's what I got for
now.
now.
A while. Yeah, that's where we're going to call it. Okay, so I'm going to present this with enough context, I guess. So I don't need to go into like there's this connection here. There's this duo called Smush. They're based in Brooklyn, New York, but Smush is the duo of one Atlee King, who has been known on the Vancouver jazz scene for some time, and his wife. And they put out a release called Standards EP. Now, if you listen to it, it is not a standards EP in the jazz school sense of it, because they don't play jazz standards, and they're like a rock project, but they do cover Don't Know Why by Norah Jones, so I guess that is almost like a standards style move. But they called it Standards EP because it's a covers project. They cover an Owl City song. They cover a couple other things. It's a 6-track thing, and it is very different from a lot of the other albums that I've been listening to lately. But this was so fun when I discovered this, and the Don't Know Why cover in particular, it's just fun what they did with it. And you know, that's a song that so many of us have heard so many times, like hearing the kind of choices that they made against that. And then the Owl City one is funny because like to imagine Owl City songs without his voice is like it's a completely different thing. But Smush Standards EP, that's going to be my third one here.
That is awesome. I'll have to check that out. I saw a couple of the clips on like Instagram Reels, I think around when they started promoting the project, and it's cool stuff.
Yeah, something that I wouldn't get to at Rhythm Changes, but is kind of tied into our world, so I definitely got to shout it out here.
Good Rex. It's, you know, when we're doing once a month, we can amass some music Rex, and maybe next month I'll have some non-music stuff as well. I've been reading a bunch too.
Yeah, that sounds good. Yeah, I think that's probably where it's going frequency wise. So we were lucky though. We had a rush of all the stories that we talked about today. Were days before we ended up recording, so it just kind of lined everything up. Otherwise, you're right. There's a lot of stuff that happens. Then you got to figure out what you're going to get to. Yeah,
totally. Yeah, recency bias helped us out to talk about what we're going to talk about.
Yeah, sounds good, man. Until next time.
Until next time, thank you.